Good morning, buenos días, bon dia a tothom, buenos días a todos.
Good morning to one and all. Thank you. I will speak in Spanish. I would like to thank CIAFA and Alzheimer Europe for this invitation to attend this conference. The previous speaker from the WHO said that dementia is a public health priority, and it is. But it's also a priority for the world of legislation, of law, health, and social services. It's not just a priority for public health. That's why today I will talk about law and the different tools that protect the elderly. We shouldn't forget that most people with Alzheimer's are part of the elderly group, and I represent the institute in Spain that cares for this age group. To start, I'd like to say that the discussion on the aging of the population and whether we need an international legal tool that will protect better or more the elderly is a discussion that has been on the international arena for many years, and the question is whether it is necessary to reinforce the rights of the elderly. We shouldn't forget Article 1 of the Universal Declaration of Human Rights that says that all human beings are born free, equal, and with the same rights. And therefore, we should ask ourselves whether there is an international gap with regard to these rights, and whether the elderly are properly protected here in Spain by our constitution and by our national and regional laws, and whether it is necessary or not to reinforce these protection tools at an international and national level. Let me show you briefly the international rules, starting with the Universal Declaration of Human Rights in 1949. We have also the International Declaration of Civil and Political Rights. We also have the principles of the UN in favor of the elderly, with the elimination of all kinds of discrimination, the Convention of the People with Disabilities, already mentioned in previous presentations. According to the international rules, we see international applications and national applications, and some of these international rules have a regional character, and their goal is to protect even better the human rights of the elderly. And all these institutions, the OEA, the European Council, the African Union, the European Union, and Mercosur, all these entities are working on drafting different rules in this regard. And in the case of Spain, we have different constitutional rules that regulate the protection of human rights and of the elderly. Firstly, we have Article 14 that establishes that all Spanish people are equal before the law. Article 50 establishes that the public entities must guarantee the economic support of the elderly. The Constitution in Spain was published in 1978, and back then the elderly were called the third age people. Then we have Article 41 that sets out that the public powers should have a social security regime. Article 43 establishes that all residents in Spain, legally or illegally, have a right to health care. There's also the right to the promotion of culture, of an appropriate housing, and there are many other civil rules and litigation rules that protect in a more specific way the human rights of the elderly. We've just seen some of the international and national rules, and now we're going to look at the regional rules in Spain. In Spain, we have 17 autonomous regions, and some of them have published some laws in their own parliaments that have to do with the care and protection of the elderly. We have specifically Andalusia, Valencia, Castilla and León, and Asturias that have established laws, have passed laws in their parliaments to protect in an additional manner and in a more reinforced manner the rights of the elderly, not just their human rights, but also their social and healthcare rights. The rest of the autonomous regions in Spain are following the same path, but right now they are just implementing framework plans with specific measures to protect the elderly, such as housing plans with specific adapted accommodation and so on. In terms of the legal measures in Spain to prevent the abuse of the elderly, as the previous speaker mentioned, in Spain we have a specific rule that is detrimental for the elderly because it requires different legal actions and civil actions and also litigation actions. However, in Spain in 2004, a law was passed, Organic Law number 1/2004, for the comprehensive protection against gender violence. And this is the path that we are following to have a comprehensive, integrative measure for the protection of the elderly in our country. Some of these measures have already been applied. For example, those that have to do with the criminal code that identifies some crimes such as abandoning the family, minors or disabled members of the family. And we also have in our criminal code an identification of lesions to people who are vulnerable due to their age or disability. Healthcare professionals have a very important task, and in our country we have different articles of the different healthcare professional associations where there is an obligation of reporting any crime or discrimination against the elderly. There are some rules also in our Spanish Civil Code that have to do with the limitation of capability and with the monitoring of the elderly and their powers of attorney, not just for the elderly. And this means having a legal agent to prevent any kind of robbery and to suspend any powers for those that don't have appropriate powers, and so on and so forth. And we also have a figure that establishes that when a member of a family is in a situation of need, they can claim from their family what is considered the minimum accommodation and medical assistance and livelihood. At an international level, we have two different positions with regard to the need of a convention, such as the Disability Convention for the elderly. And this is widely defended by NGOs, by entities in Latin America and in Eastern Europe for those elderly people who do not have the means to support themselves. For example, to be able to defend before the international courts the rights of people. However, there is another large group of countries, such as the EU, that doesn't believe that we need an international convention for the protection of the elderly. Arguments in favor of this legal instrument. Its existence would mean increasing the awareness about the elderly, and it would be a tangible commitment by all the countries, and it would be a way of improving the information level and improving the access of the rules that are currently fragmented, as I mentioned at the beginning. And we would be providing the elderly with all the protection measures that we have for other groups, such as children. In this way, we would be covering some of these legal loops, and we would be putting pressure on the national government so that they would pass laws accordingly. And the EU, however, is against this instrument, and Spain as well, because they consider that it's not necessary to have this international convention, and any legal loops should be met with specific rules and standards, as was stated in the International Plan for Aging, in the convention held in 2010 in Madrid, and a working group was established that has been working in recent years without much progress. Therefore, the EU considers that it's not necessary to have an international framework because there are already several rules, international rules, that cover the rights of the elderly, and it would be problematic to have a convention because, firstly, we would need to identify who is an elderly person depending on the age. Would it be 60, 65, 55, 70? Therefore, what is necessary is to implement specific measures at a national level that can be used before the national courts to reach an agreement. As stated in 2010, it would be very costly and the negotiations would be long. And so far, no results have been achieved. And for the elderly to have a convention would mean that other specific population groups to have their own convention, such as the disabled. And they have it, and so do the children. But what about the young people? What is the age we define for young people? And in the last meeting in New York, we saw three radically different positions. Here we have some countries that who are in favor of its approval, some who are against its approval, and others, such as the EU, that consider that we should go beyond this discussion and have the working groups working so that they can reinforce the national instruments available at each country. And I have to say that there are two countries, France, for example, in 2015 passed a very interesting law to adapt French society to its aging population with very interesting measures. And since 2015, these laws have been in place. And then also Spain. Spain approved a new framework for the elderly, and in 2017 they created a commission to face the demographic challenge in Spain. And the IMSERSO is now creating a national strategy for the elderly that tries to establish specific measures to protect in a better way and in a stronger way the rights and the reality of the elderly. And that's all. Thank you very much for your attention.